You're listening to the Thravellers podcast, a podcast for the over 30s who like to travel. You can follow our adventures, see our honest reviews, and get links to everything mentioned in this podcast at thravellers.com. So welcome to the Thravellers podcast. My name is Al.
I'm Leanne.
And we're a husband and wife team who've been travelling full-time since 2017. We're doing things a little bit differently now. So we used to just do episodes as and when we remembered them, but we're going to change things up a little bit. So this is an entire series. We've been a little bit, I suppose, a little bit influenced by Top Gear, I suppose. We watch a lot of Top Gear and Gear Top. What's it called now?
The Grand Tour.
Grand Tour. Leanne pointed out that it's Grand Tour is GT and Top Gear is TG, and so maybe it's a bit of a two fingers up at the BBC.
It might just be a coincidence, but
it's possible.
I'd prefer it's a finger up to the BBC.
So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about where we are going to be looking at in this particular series. We'll get a little bit of a series preview for you and just an overview of the entire area. So, Leanne, where is this series going to be based?
So series 2, we're going to be exploring the Balkans and largely the former Yugoslavia, which we should say now that is our favorite region in Europe.
I think so.
Possibly one of our favorite region in the world.
Yeah,
it's
definitely
incredible. So we'll be exploring the Balkans, majority of the former Yugoslavia, and when we started traveling to the former Yugoslavia, I think where did we go first? We went to Slovenia first, which we've actually already covered in an earlier episode of the Thravellers podcast. Mm-hmm. We talked about Slovenia. But when we got there, we really got intrigued by the history because we were what? In single digits in the 90s, pretty much. Maybe just double digits in the mid-90s when the kind of Yugoslavia war came to an end. So I just remember charities sending aid to places like Bosnia and Kosovo. And so when we got there, I was really intrigued by the history of the place because I felt quite uneducated about it. So the first thing we did was we actually sat and watched the BBC documentary. Well,
you're lying there because we didn't watch it. We've watched episode 1 about 4 times. We've got to episode 4. And each time the politics are quite complicated. If you don't know anything about it, which I say we didn't really. I'm a bit older than Leanne, so I remember a little bit more than Leanne. But it's the Yugoslavia seems like former Yugoslavia states seem like a very scary countries, and particularly I know that when we've been to places like Serbia, and some of our friends thought we were going to Siberia. They didn't know what to expect. They were like, what's Serbia like? And of course we'll get onto that in a separate episode, but a lot of the places just seem a little bit sort of daunting, I suppose.
Definitely. The news, places you hear on the news.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you remember the if you talk about the NATO strikes of even the late 90s, which was after the Yugoslav war. You just remember all these, and Jeremy Bowen on the Mostar Bridge, and so it does seem quite a scary place. So I know that when we told our parents we were going there, they weren't over the moon, were they?
No.
However, you're going to find over the next 8 episodes, you're going to find that actually there's almost every single country we fell in love with, and it's the scenery, the people. It's just absolutely amazing. So,
a quick history lesson, perhaps?
I was just going to say that.
Go on then.
Well, I was going to ask you, Leanne, give us a quick history lesson.
So, as you said, we watched the documentary multiple episodes at the same time to try and understand it. But from what I've understood, the former Yugoslavia was formed after the Second World War as a peacekeeping exercise and a defence exercise to protect that part of the world in terms of any other future invasions. So the states were Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Macedonia, Montenegro, and have I said more?
I think you've said that. There's Macedonia, Montenegro,
Serbia.
I think that's all of them. There's like a pseudo state as well. There's two. I'm going to be very careful how I say this because there's like a pseudo state which is Albania, but Albania isn't necessarily part of the former Yugoslavia.
No.
But it's certainly, we've grouped it because the political ideals and a lot of people will class it as, I suppose, the home of a lot of people from Yugoslavia.
Absolutely. And then there's the consideration of Kosovo, which is
Glad you said this.
not recognised by all countries in the world. It's not recognised by the UN either as an independent country.
Oh, is it not?
No, but it is in fact an independent country and has a very rich Albanian history, which is another reason we grouped Albania into this series. But yeah, so the former Yugoslavia was formed. It was ruled for a long time by Tito, who was a much loved and respected politician in the region by all states, from what we've understood talking to people. And it was on his death that things started to get a little bit hairy.
Yeah, and I think that it's fair to say that although he's much loved from, I suppose if we called us the West of Europe, we did look at him as a kind of a Joseph Stalin sort of esque character where he was very much, rule with an iron fist. And there was lots of potentially bad things talked about him. But what's weird is that coming from Western Europe is that I always thought that Tito was a bad thing and that Yugoslavia was a bad thing. But actually, when you speak to people particularly the older people, maybe sort of 60 years old, and they were absolutely in love with the nationalist idea. We'll go into this in Slovenia, but there's one guy we spoke to in Slovenia who said that under Yugoslav rule, every single person in the country got 2 weeks in a skiing resort or a particular holiday because it was part of the package of being an employee in
Communist.
Communist
Country, yeah.
And I think that's weird, is that coming to it from probably the opposite of communism, which is the UK, although current politics may skew that, but coming from the opposite idea of communism, then we always think that communism is bad, but actually the people of former Yugoslavia seem to be very happy with the way things were. Yeah,
there seemed to be upsides of having that political regime that we perhaps weren't educated on and didn't appreciate. So it is a really interesting and complex political history, and remains so in terms of the relationships between the states now. So in terms of where we've been and where we're going to go, and our series 2 of the Thravellers podcast, we're going to start in one of our favourite countries in the former Yugoslavia, and that is Slovenia, which we have spoken about before. But we're going to talk to you about the place we've been, Ljubljana, Bled, and of course Maribor, where we have a second family now. So the first episode we're going to talk about Slovenia.
Yeah, and I think that Slovenia is one of those weird places where people say Slovenia, Slovakia, they sound the same, are they the same, and they are so different. Then we go into Croatia, which is probably a bit more well known to anyone who's holidayed down on that particular coast, the Dalmatian coast, or down towards Italy. Croatia is kind of split up into sort of 3 main areas: the Dalmatian, which is famous now for the Game of Thrones. Dubrovnik, yes. And then there's the interior of the country, which is Zagreb, and that's pretty cool. And then there's a little place called Istria, which is a little sort of peninsula, which is, I think, does it border with Slovenia, doesn't it?
Borders with Slovenia, yeah, but it's also very close to Italy. So there's a big Italian influence in that part of Croatia.
In fact, as you go inland from Istria, you go to a place called Rijeka, which I think borders with Italy, doesn't it?
I think historically it did.
Historically. Yeah. Right, okay. Well, we'll talk more about that when we talk about Croatia. So another one of our favourite places. We loved it.
Yeah, so Bosnia will be our next stop on our Balkan series. Bosnia, I actually do get a little bit emotional when I talk about Bosnia, because it is just the most beautiful country. It has such a hard time and such a dark past, yet I am not sure I've met people who are kinder, more generous with their time, with their knowledge. And it's not just us that think that. We've met so many people from other former Yugoslavian states, from people across the world, who have all said that the people of Bosnia are the friendliest, the most kind-hearted. Bosnia is more than likely going to be our next home, I think.
Yes, I think so. And it's funny because we've talked about this before when we talked about Cambodia, and we will talk about this in another series. Sorry, is that the more difficult a recent past a country's had, it tends to be the more amazing the people are. But anyway, without going too much into that. So then we hop over the mountains of Bosnia into Montenegro, which is...
Montenegro.
Oh my God, one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Do you know, and we should say that in Europe, we drive. We take our dog, we load up our Rex trailer and we drive around Europe. Mm-hmm. We've covered a lot of miles, and I can count on one hand the number of places that we've actually stopped to take in a view. Mm-hmm. But the one place we stopped more than once was Montenegro. Absolutely. We actually stayed in Kotor, but we drove through Budva, and Montenegro's got a lot more about it than just a coast. But it's a fascinating country with lots of some really interesting ideas. They allow you to become a Montenegrin. I don't know how you say that. And they allow you to become a resident of the country if you pay, I think it's €1 million. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
And but the idea is that you pay €1 million to the government as like a bond. So they borrow it from you, they invest it in 5 years' time, they give it you back. And of course, it's a great way for the government to raise money for infrastructure, etc. But not that they really need it now because of the amazing tourism. So we're going to be talking a lot more about Montenegro and how amazing that is. So where are we going next?
We do, and our next episode is going to focus on Serbia. I'm going to be honest, I was really nervous about going to Serbia, and I think it's because kind of what we'd read and what we'd watched about the Yugoslavian war. Serbia seemed to be kind of a bit of a scary place, but like most things, it's not. It's a perception that is quickly found to be untrue. So we'll talk to you about our experience in Belgrade, in Novi Sad, and the amazing people that we met, but also the slight hostility that we did experience at times being British. But all in all, Serbia, Belgrade especially, is an amazing city.
So modern. You could be in Manchester. You could be any kind of modern country in the UK. So Kosovo is a bit of a thorny one for us because we've tried to go a couple of times, and it's not that we've not been able to let in, but there's a slight weird little circumstance you have to do, where if you have a Kosovan stamp on your passport, then you might not necessarily be allowed into Serbia again. Mm-hmm. So we've tried to. So our aim is to go to Kosovo when our passports expire, the year our passports expire. So when they get renewed, there's no stamp in there, so we can go back to Serbia. However, I think Leanne's lined up an interview with someone who has been to Kosovo.
Yeah, we're going to speak to a few people actually who've been to Kosovo to understand a bit more about their experiences in the country that we've not been to. And I have no doubt we'll love it because we love the rest of that region. So it'll be great to hear from other people what they think of it.
Exactly. And Dua Lipa's from Pristina, isn't she? Or is that, am I thinking of Rita Ora?
Rita Ora, yeah, it's from Pristina. Yeah.
Clearly not cool enough. Okay, where are we after Kosovo?
So after Kosovo, we go to Macedonia, which I'm sure they won't mind me saying is the weirdest country in the former Yugoslavia, and I mean that with such affection. We're going to talk to you about our experiences in Skopje and in Lake Ohrid. It's just weird, and it's fabulous, and just unapologetically nationalistic in the most lovely way. And I mean, in terms of the region, Macedonia is very different to the rest of the former Yugoslavia. The language is very different. The culture is very different. The influences are much more from Bulgaria and Greece. So it's a very, very different country. But again, loved it. Beautiful, beautiful place. But very different.
And I think that it's actually changed its name since we were there, hasn't it?
Yes, when we went, it was that really long name, the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia, whereas now I think it's just North Macedonia.
Which, of course, we'll talk about it more, but there's a part of Greece that is North Macedonia, and I think there was a problem with, or Macedonia, and so there was a problem with being able to call it Macedonia, I think. Okay, so if you go from Macedonia to a place called Lake Ohrid, which we went, Ohrid, I'm not sure.
I've heard it pronounced both ways.
We're going to find out by episode 8. So if you go across that lake divides Albania and Macedonia. And so there's some cool roads driving around that lake and on the way. But then we're going to go to Albania. We're going to tell you a little bit more about, we went to 2 places in Albania. One place called Samil, which was odd. And I saw a €500 note for the first time ever. And then we went up to Durrës, near the capital. Do you remember the capital's name?
I want to say we go with a T.
Yeah. You're going to be shouting through your headphones when you're listening to this, aren't you, if you know what the capital is. But we will definitely find out by episode 9, and we will tell you all about the good, the bad, and potentially the ugly in Albania. As you're probably going to see, the theme from this is we tend to be quite honest about things, and not to the detriment of a country, but we will be quite honest about our experiences from it. So look forward to some stories from there. And then is that the end of our...
Yeah, that's series 2. So to recap, we're covering the Balkans, and you'll be joining us as we recollect our memories and our love and our question marks over countries including Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, Kosovo, Macedonia, and Albania.
Cool. So I hope you'll listen to the next episode. I almost said tune in there. God, I'm so American, aren't I?
Tune in, guys.
I hope you'll listen to the next episode. And until then, look forward to talking to you. But it's not really talking to you, is it? It's talking at you.
Yeah. Look forward to talking at you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Thravellers podcast. Thanks for listening, and head on over to thravellers.com for all the show notes and links mentioned in the show.